Hello everyone, here is something that I didn't tell you last year when I talked about living with a VP shunt. That is, knowing when it's breaking down. This will also apply if you need a first shunt. The first thing that happened to me was on a nice Friday. I had a lovely day. It was lovely weather, and then about 8 o'clock in the evening, I got the most pounding headache. I had to go to bed early, which, for me, I sleep at midnight, so 8 o'clock was definitely early. By the way, when I say headache, I don't mean a normal headache. I don't even mean a cluster or ice pick headache. I mean the kind of headache that incapacitates you completely. You will not be able to do anything except immediately know that you must dive into a dark place. For me, it was diving back on my bed with my arm over my eyes to keep the darkness out, to not let any light in whatsoever. In my case, it was a nice Friday. I was actually enjoying life, and then it hit completely out of nowhere like a bomb in the blitz. Then next day, which was Saturday, I woke up with the ghost of a headache. It's like the place where the headache was feels like it has cramp, but it's where a headache was, like you get at the back of your knees, that same sensation, but it's on your head. That happened to go away after I ate breakfast, so I had a nice day with the dog and everything went well. All continued well until Sunday evening. Then just as I was going off to bed at midnight, I heard a weird sensation come over my body. I sleep with a night light because of my vision and other issues, and I couldn't look in the direction of the light, so the photophobia was starting. When I tried to actually turn away from the light, my stomach decided to remind me that it existed, but only as a warning. I felt dizzy and nauseous. I mistook it for the monthly thing that we all have to go through. In fact, there was an earlier time. This situation happened in August, but I'm telling you about the very first incident that was brushed off when I had similar symptoms, and they thought it was just that, so they just told me to go home and rest, and then it would go away. Anyway, getting back to August, I rolled over facing the dog, and I hadn't made the connection with Friday because I get headaches often. So I went to sleep and I woke up the next day, which was a Monday. I wobbled to the bathroom and brought up everything, including the medication I took that morning. And this is when I began to realise that it was because I turned on the light like you do when you go to the bathroom, and it was so overpowering that I had to turn it off again. And then run back to my room quickly and ask for a bucket. So, just to clear up, photophobia is one of the signs that they tell you to look for if you either have need of a shunt or if you need a replacement. And listen, having a headache is one thing. We all get them on occasion, especially if we're hot and out in the sun. It could mean that you're dehydrated, or at worst, it could be a migraine that you just need to lie down for. But when you mix that with bad balance and inability to keep liquids down, and it doesn't go away for 3 days straight, and there's 3 24-hour periods constantly, when you can't keep water down, that is when it becomes more than just the average headache or migraine. I have even had cluster headaches that were terrible, but I could still keep food and water down, and especially water, not even my meds. And to the actual migraine itself, it actually feels like the police are in my head and they're doing that meme of FBI, open up, just in my skull. Also, I couldn't reposition myself. Moving was not an option, and even the laziest person ever will need to reposition at some point, so I did that at my own peril. By the way, that 72-hour rule was something I was told as a child, and it had never ever come into effect until that day in August, except for when I was a baby. So I knew what this was and I decided to act, and this is how I knew it was serious. I couldn't be a dog mum, I couldn't move, so therefore Jack had to be cared for by someone else. It wasn't something I could push through because every moment triggered a pain that torturers would love. And speaking of the dog, The night before, he had told me something was up with me. He kept clinging to me. He kept staring at my head. He kept sniffing me and coming to me before he went to bed. And I ignored it because I felt fine. Lesson learned. The reason I have decided to make this video is because I know that sometimes some of you will want to toughen up and fight through and bite through pain because you think it's the right thing to do. If it is something that you have never experienced before, or if you know that you have head or tumour problems in your family, don't delay, sort it today. Even if, like I said in my last video, you go, they check you and tell you that there's nothing. I'm going to put the symptoms on screen so you can see what you're looking for, and you may have one or two of these, but if you have the majority, get checked just in case, because we need you. As men, you are more likely to ignore things, so please don't do that. But we women, we can go to the doctor and still be ignored for something that is important, especially if we're on the younger side, like between 18 to 40. A relative of mine went to the doctor for pain and they immediately saw him because he's a man over the age of 40. They immediately gave him poppy juice and he said he never slept so well, which doesn't surprise me because that's the point of that kind of medicine. But because he is a man over the age of 40, he tends to get more attention. In my experience, I have noticed that people between the ages of 0 to 18 tend to get more care from doctors and treated urgently. Then from 18 to 40, you suddenly are considered overreacting. And then from 41 up until old age, you're certainly considered important again. However, when you get into like your 60s, yes, they take a lot of care of you, but they may look to someone else just in case you've lost a couple of marbles. But going back to that day, I told my mum that I needed an ambulance. They sent for my GP, who did not think it was anything serious. She gave me an antiemetic, but she didn't give me all of it, so it didn't help. Then she told me that if I waited 2 weeks and the symptoms hadn't gone away, that I should just check back after 2 weeks. This is why getting a second opinion is always good, because if I'd waited 2 weeks, I wouldn't have a YouTube channel. Obviously, I didn't listen and I actually went to the hospital. The local hospital said they didn't have the equipment, but that they thought it had to do with my shunt, so they sent me to a bigger hospital, which was a bit further away. And after a couple of days of me being tested to see if that's what it was, they finally did the procedure to remove all the fluid and replace the faulty shunt. Well, they tried to replace it, but they said that it had to stay there because it had become part of my body. So I have two. One doesn't work, but it's just there for funsies, and the other one actually works. So don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. But if anyone else suffers the symptoms, do not brush it off as work stress. Please. Getting to the hospital was actually very interesting because they had to carry me down on a stretcher while I covered my eyes and then turned all the lights off in the ambulance except for the driver. Talking was not even an option. They had to whisper when talking around me because every noise hurt. But yes, if you can't eat, okay, you might be sick. But if you can't keep water in your system, don't ignore it. And just to explain how serious and how delicate the shunt is, I was bullied at school and the bullies used to think it was really, really fun to kick balls at my head or throw basketballs at my head for fun. These were children between the ages of 5 to 10, so luckily not too much damage was done, but it meant that my mum would have to then come into the school, take me to the office and look at my shunt to see if it was damaged because the valve apparently sticks out of your head. Obviously, I have never seen this, but apparently it can be seen. So if it gets damaged, that means I have to go back to the hospital. Obviously, children are not going to know this, but it's better to be safe than sorry based on the symptoms I stated above. As I said in my last video, second options are free. And if you live in a country where they're not free, try to get as much information as you can on the first consultation because it doesn't hurt to double check and it will hurt the people that you love to buy your coffin as you become a compost heap. I will say, the first time I had it was when I was a baby. I had all these symptoms, but I was a baby and I couldn't speak, and that's why my mum took me to the doctor to get checked. But they said that she was just a first-time mum and that it was nothing and that she was just worrying. But my mum is a warrior, and she sat down in the hospital and said, I'm not leaving until you check her. And then you know what happened, because as I've said before, they came back sheepish. If you want to know why, I'll find the video where I spoke about it. But as you don't have access to my warrior of a mum, do not be afraid to speak up. Now, on a more positive note, the reason I'm doing this video is because this month is about looking after the brain. So whether you do that physically, like I have demonstrated above, or mentally by looking after your mental health or doing some brain training games to keep yourself smart to ward off the dementia, do what you can to keep your brain happy. In fact, when I got to the hospital, they knew instinctively that I needed to have my own room. I couldn't take any noise, so it was just me and the person who came to the hospital with me. I only know one other person who had a shunt like me. They're older than me, and they had one of the first shunts that ever came out. They're still alive and kicking, so it's good. But just keep that in mind. Look out for symptoms and look after yourself. By the way, this happened in 2013, literally just before I turned 21, so it's working fine and I'm not going anywhere. Don't you worry. You look after yourselves, and I'll see you back here next week. This situation was actually one of the reasons I considered having a YouTube channel, because I thought if that situation had gone the other way, there would have been nothing of me for anyone to remember me by. Those thoughts were put down, but then they were picked back up after Sylvie died, because it reminded me that sometimes these things are important. What I will say about the after effects are things that require memory for me are difficult. I had nice handwriting before, and then I forgot how to shape letters, and I still have trouble with that now for me. I can't remember faces or anything now unless I'm looking at it. I also developed misophonia after the operation, but it gets better. However, not being able to recognise faces, including the ones that I have known for my entire life, can be scary sometimes. It doesn't matter if it's a human or an animal face. If I'm not looking at it, I don't remember it. And obviously I found ways around it, and it's one of the reasons I'm trying to write a book, because I'm trying to trigger my imagination again. Because my dreams are clear, but not when I'm awake. And it does only affect my vision, because if I call out, I can recognise voices. And when I look at the person, I can recognise them. But these are just some of the things that will happen from my experience. If you have this condition, do not forget that the brain is a muscle. And yes, it may have been touched, but it can help. If you do not give up, it can improve, but you have to help it. If you're still here, then you're handsome and you're beautiful. And you, well, I'm speechless. I'll let you know next time I see you. Over to the pets. Hello all, this is Sylvie. If you liked what you saw, then subscribe for more. Hey everyone, my name's Bonjour. If you enjoyed yourself, then give it a thumbs up and share it with all your friends. Hi everybody, I'm Jack, and if you had fun, then comment down below and let my mum know what was the worst headache you've ever had.